Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for McKenzie River Trust Reflections and Resilience 2020. My name is Liz Lawrence. I'm the Development Director for McKenzie River Trust, and I'm here to welcome you tonight. I know there are some people who are joining us tonight from their homes, others from temporary homes, and wherever you are, thank you so much for taking the time to be here together with us in community during what has been a remarkable week. First, before we get started, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping items. When you entered the webinar, the system automatically put you on mute and turned off your webcam. So you are in a view only, listen only mode. We would like to thank Quick Caption for providing us with a closed caption option. If you'd like to see the captions, click on the closed caption button in your control panel at the top of your screen, and the captions will appear at the bottom of your screen. We'd now like to give a land acknowledgement. And I just want to say this is new for us at McKenzie River Trust, and we recognize and appreciate those who have helped us to develop this statement. We would like to acknowledge and honor the Indigenous people who stewarded the lands that we are on today for many generations before us. Colonization by white settlers drove most Indigenous people away from their homelands, usually by force or coercion. It's important to acknowledge our past so that we may work towards a more just and equitable future. Our projects and service area includes the traditional homelands of the Kalapuya, Siletz, Coos, Lower Umpqua, Siuslaw, Molalla, and other bands and tribes. Today, many of their descendants are part of the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians, and Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. Please take a moment now to reflect on where you are standing today or where you call home, and join me in honoring those who care for the land before you. Thank you. We understand that having a role in land ownership means that we have a responsibility to those whose lands were stolen from them. The land calls to us to commit to continue learning how to be better stewards of the land, as well as better allies to all of the peoples that inhabit it. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our Executive Director, Joe Mall.
Thanks, Liz. Hello, everyone again in Zoom land. Appreciate you all being here. And let's begin by acknowledging for a moment just where we are, how we feel. 6 months into a pandemic, we were already exhausted with worry, frustrated by so many plans that have been changed and canceled. Been saddened by the physical distance we've needed to maintain. And now, since last Monday night, we're enduring a crisis born on 50-mile-an-hour winds. No time to plan, just time to act. We're in emergency mode. We're fearful of unknowns. We're grieving with the friends and community members in Vida, Blue River, Glide, and dozens of other communities around Oregon and across the West right now. Many of you have asked how best to help. A simple, effective thing you can do is make a donation to the United Way of Lane County Wildfire Response Fund. We're placing a web link and a mailing address for that fund in the chat box tonight. Since that fund was set up last Wednesday, they have received, as of today, more than $500,000. And as of today, have already distributed $200,000 grants to groups that are providing temporary shelter, healthcare, counseling services, power, water, and even direct cash to people that have been affected in these communities. Those are big numbers and a powerful community response. but they will need and can use much more in the days and weeks ahead. If you've already given, thank you. I hope you will all consider giving for the first time or again and again. Many of you have also given generously of your time and labor, both to the McKenzie River Trust prior to the COVID and the fires, and now with us in some of the on-the-ground relief efforts. And this evening, we wanted to invite our volunteer coordinator, Elizabeth Goward, to provide a few updates on how our stellar volunteers have been so helpful in these challenging times as well. Elizabeth?
Thanks, Joe. Can't see if I'm there yet. So good evening, everyone. I was looking through the participant list, and indeed, many of you here tonight have lent your hands to the land as well as to your neighbors in the last year. As Joe said, COVID-19 came in and made our programs shift pretty drastically. The beginning of the year, volunteers pivoted really quickly to continue stewarding lands, taking on independent volunteer projects, helping us to create socially distanced systems to continue taking care of all of the lands that we have under our hand. And then in the past week, we've seen just an overwhelming support of all of you and others in the community looking to support our neighbors in need at this time. So first of all, I want to thank some of the volunteers who we were just out on the land. It seems like it can't possibly have only been a week and a half ago, but the Friends of Rimrock Ranch, who have been working tirelessly over the past 3 years to care for this stretch of river up on the McKenzie, many of whom are currently not at home or unsure if they'll have their home to go back to. And I just really want to extend my care and appreciation for all that you have given over the years and let you know that we continue to look forward to rebuilding alongside you and to showing up the way that you've shown up for the land over the coming years and months ahead. To that effort, we have been mobilizing volunteers, supporting partners at United Way of Lane County, St. Vincent de Paul, Lane County Emergency Operations to help get relief services out to community members in need. We have been working to set up the Roosevelt Wildfire Relief Site, and I see in the participant list, many of you I had the pleasure of actually seeing face to face for the first time in many, many months on that site, working to get services to those in need. We'd also like to direct people to other resources. The Red Cross local chapter is seeking people to help aid in delivering meals to folks who are in temporary shelters. That's up on our website, which I know will go into the chat shortly. And also got off the phone with the amazing community members who stepped up and created the Silky Field distribution site and are now more permanently lodged at the Masonic Lodge out on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. And they're also looking for volunteers there to drop in and provide these critical services at this time. So all of that information can be found on the link that is below. These are our first level of volunteer needs that are coming. But as we look to the months and the years ahead, and we get out onto the land and assess what's needed, we're going to be asking you to come and join us as we seek to help care for, steward, and restore the lands that we all call home. So we're really happy to have you here this evening with us from wherever you are. And thank you to everyone who's a steward of the land and a steward of one another during these incredibly challenging times. We are going to pass it back to Joe for a little more, and thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And yeah, thanks everyone that's been a part of what's been going on this past week. It has been, as it has been trying, it has been remarkably inspiring to see how the community is responding and to see the energy within the community. So thank you. So originally with this event, we did want to give you a little bit of an update on some of the projects we've been working on this year, and we'd still like to do that. So we have a few photo images. Looks like we're gonna, here we go. Yeah, I just want to describe a few of the things that we've been up to. The land trust community and the conservation community in Oregon has really become a network, an inner web, a web working together. This year, we picked up a conservation easement, a project in the Deschutes Land Trust country. We actually are a conservation easement holder on about 1,100 acres that they now own, called Rimrock Ranch. And you're going to see more of that. There is strength in working together and the resilience of backing each other up, holding each other accountable, helping each other just as we have. So, you know, there are a lot of you that spend time going back and forth over the mountains. We certainly look forward to spending more time with our colleagues in the Bend area and in Deschutes. Also similar conversations just up the road with Greenbelt Land Trust and some of the work that they're doing in the Kalapuya. And again, I think you will see more and more this interaction across land trusts and conservation groups in the state. So that's part of the resilience that we're trying to create. If we could go to the next slide, a little closer to home. Just a couple months and maybe a little over a month ago now, we acquired 120 acres right in the Mohawk Valley. This is a property that many of you have driven past, the Marvin and Marie Spores conservation area. It is an area that the family that has stewarded it, cared for a long time, has worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Natural Resource Conservation Service to enhance the habitat and protect portions of it. And they approached us when they decided that they wanted to see it in conservation ownership long-term. What's really exciting about this is in one of those photos, and a couple of those photos, you can see some hillside there in the background. That is right on the edge, over the edge of some of the fire line that has been held. But it is also close to lands recently acquired by the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. The tribes acquired, I think, around 500 acres over there, just a couple of parcels away. And again, the strength of partnership with members of the tribes, with watershed councils, with others in the conservation community, really helped us see how beneficial, how valuable it is to work together so that we begin to have more and more impact across the landscape, really meaningful scale. The question of fire, I know, is very much on our minds, no question. With Liz's recognition, with the acknowledgement of where we are, also we have a growing recognition that fire was a part of indigenous culture here for thousands of years, and something that we have much to learn from. And we're very fortunate to have partners at many of the tribes across the area to help us learn. So in the coming years, I think you will see more opportunity for all of us to consider what role fire will play in our landscape as it's changing. Go ahead and shift now to the middle McKenzie. This week, despite, or maybe because of the pain we're experiencing, it has been profoundly healing and encouraging for me to know that this is the week when we see Chinook salmon beginning to spawn on the middle McKenzie. This is the week that we begin to see them in the Reach, Finrock Reach, Elk Creek. Many of you have been to those side channels. They are there now. We don't have video or photos or anything, but I'm confident that they're there just working diligently at what they've done for generations and generations. And so this restoration work that we've described in some of our outreach there on the South Fork of the McKenzie, on Deer Creek with the U.S. Forest Service and the McKenzie Watershed Council and many other partners will be moving into Finrock Reach in the coming years. We still don't know what has happened with the fires on that particular property. We've seen some brief images, but it will be a while before we can safely get back out there. But to know that that river will still be there and will be a part of the healing, both for the ecosystem and for our community, again, gives us confidence to move forward. And thank you for that. Finally, we've got some images from Green Island. I started with the McKenzie River Trust in 2005. right after the trust had begun restoration on that 1,100 acre parcel now. And over time, every year, we have watched as the trees that you have had a hand in planting have grown, how plantings have become rich forests and attracted wildlife, how the river itself has meandered as we've allowed it to come back into some of that floodplain. And it continues to amaze us both with the power of the river, the healing power of the river, and what can be some disruptive power. And it gives us pause to think about what we should be doing on the banks of the river, and how, as you've heard us repeat frequently, what it means to be a living river and respectful of the river and how we live there. We'll continue to do work out there. We look forward to welcoming people back onto the ground as soon as we're able, as soon as it's safe again. And very quickly, I look forward to hugging many of you when we can get back out into the field. At times like this, we also turn to people who have ways with words and thoughts and can give us that pause that we need to reflect on these things. And so tonight, we've invited the local writer and just tremendous community member, Tom Titus, to read from a couple of his pieces that we thought would be helpful in what we're trying to do now. Tom?
Thank you, Joe. It's really an honor to read for this event. Many of you may know that the McKenzie River is actually my home watershed. Mom still lives on the place that we moved into when I was 3 years old. And my brother and I spent a few frantic days up there trying to make the place as fire resistant as we could. Everything's stable now and safe, and we're breathing easier. But I'm just so grateful to the leading role that MRT's played in marshaling resources, both material and monetary, for fire relief. My roots run deep in that valley, and I still know a lot of people there, and many of them have lost large chunks of their lives. So what I'd like to do this evening is read two pieces from a recent book that I put out, a little book called Palindrome, Grateful Reflections from the Home Ground. And I'd also like to mention that, just as my small bit towards contributing to the Fire Relief Fund, basically all of my profits that come as a result of book sales between now and the end of October, I'm going to put back into that United Way fund for fire relief. So this first piece is called Shedding, and I think you'll see why it's relevant. I'm rolling south of Saginaw on Interstate 5, an unusually late start for the Johnny Gunter cabin. An angry, sleepless night has left me thin and tired. The weather is changing. A blackberry-tinged sunset sags over the western ridge. Wildfire smoke and incoming clouds churn together. They become the pearlescent interior of an oyster shell, arching over toasted rectangles of pasture and ryegrass stretching toward darkening foothills. I say it exhausted. I say it knowing carcinogenic bits of burned tree carbon have infiltrated my eyes and lungs. I say it aloud, flying along this flat 65-mile-per-hour car-ridden crayoned line of 4-lane asphalt. I say that I'm living in the most beautiful place in the world. Headlights tunnel up the driveway to the cabin, boring into shadows of Douglas fir and sallow. I unlock the old house, take a few things inside, then turn off all the lights. I suppose I should park myself on the porch in lotus position, palms upturned, taking deep, meditative breaths. Instead, I sit in a cast-off lawn chair, legs stretched outward into blackness. A bourbon bottle balances on my right on a stack of cinder blocks, and I take a pull, hope the hot whiskey burn will somehow disinfect my soul. Occasionally this has worked. Darkness presses over my skin that has become too tight, my skin that is making me itchy and irritable. If only I could shed this thing. I sip and scratch and squirm and sip some more. A cool breeze flows in from the west, rippling over the ridges of my face. The weather is changing. Morning brings heavy mist. Through the doorway, I watch a doe browsing at the edge of the brown meadow, head and legs light and quick. She is the color of desiccated grass, the color of a cougar. She chews a few brown stems of cut knapweed. Then for no apparent reason, she leaps from the ground, jumping quickly to one side, maybe just for the joy of eating wet brown knapweed at the shriveled end of summer. Flat spider webs litter the yard like somber tossed out plates, every one with a tunnel that disappears into the eternity of a bowl hole. Above the old forest, a blue sky crack drifts casually toward the sun. Gray light transforms to silver. Spider plates glisten, each sequined with 1,000 tiny droplets of captured mist. The weather has changed. My skin does not itch. Shedding. The second piece actually was written as I sat on the banks of the South Fork of the McKenzie. I have no idea what those banks look like at this very moment. Some of you know I teach an amphibians and reptiles class. I was gratified to see, by the way, in the picture of the salmon, a beautiful coastal giant salamander there in that photograph. And I would ask my class to engage in a creative writing project, and the deal was I write with them. I go out there and I spend some time writing, and the other part of the deal is I have to have mine done one day before theirs is due, and I read it in front of class. And so it developed some rapport, and I've always been really appreciative of the time that I've spent out there. And so this is one of those pieces called Open Trail. Trail closed. Red capital letters shout from the edge of the quieting forest. Some say I'm deep, some say I'm troubled, and a few say I'm deeply troubled. I just say yes and walk past the sign. A thin path threads a carpet of sword fern and bunchberry spread under cool morning shadows of Douglas fir. I turn toward the creek and settle my butt in a cushion of dry moss. Thimbleberry canes rise from this softness, leaves like splayed palms, some holding wide-eyed five-petaled stars, others with green thumbnail berries anticipating the ripening summer. A dwarf Oregon grape prickles my right leg. Breathe, open. Above the hurrying stream, a yellow salamander of light slips through, becomes a squirming green scatter amid alder leaves. Dappled water dashes over ochre stones, scatter of cold volcano bones. Jumbled creek music surges above tumbling water. Higher frequencies rise to the top, float somewhere above bumblebee buzz, but beneath the highest note of Swainson's thrush, whose liquid call lifts toward the ridge. Water bulges and breaks over a large stone, becoming a soothing mid-range burble before running headlong into a fallen fir. In the lower register lies an intermittent gurgle, as though the stream is clearing her throat. The rumble settles in my chest. It is the subtle admonishment of an elder, asking that I open myself to spacious, uncluttered voice. Uncluttered, but not uncomplicated. I'm breathing in this place as an unlikely outcome of 3 generations of wood products livelihoods that cling to me like that moss cap on the decaying stump across the creek, its rotten brick red face staring. Spires of old Douglas fir, limbless for 100 feet, pierce the blue band of sky. I see those trees lying in state, bound to log trucks headed for a mill far from this canyon, ready for precision, transformation by laser-driven saws into high-grade lumber smelling of sweet turpentine. You see, I can never be unlogged. Again, the creek clears her throat. Yes, I am of logging, but my days have become a healing clear cut, new trees from roots pushing down, canopy casting upward, outward, growing into stability and shade, becoming a mixed forest, complex in space and time. I am the deepening wild, woven needles of dank wood and aching water bathing gills of coastal giant salamanders and suckermouth tadpoles of tailed frogs. I am fingers stiffening with age and morning cold. I am an open trail. Thank you. And thanks for having me. Joe, are you going to come back in? And
I was just going to let you read all night, Tom, but I guess that wouldn't be responsible. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can't recommend enough both this book and Tom's prior book, Blackberries in July. Thank you for the generous redistribution of profits from this to the United Way program. Zoom's hard enough. As you can probably tell, we are struggling, as I'm sure everyone is. We're exhausted, we're heartbroken, we are staring into some unknowns. And we're often described as a hopeful organization, a gathering of people that, given all of the challenges that the earth and all its meanings face, how do you stay so hopeful? Stay hopeful with great people and inspiring people like Tom. There's another up the road in Corvallis that we had asked to join us tonight. She was not able to, but she graciously agreed to, through Zoom, do a reading that we could record and now we'll play back for you. Kathleen D, who spoke as a part of a project we did, I think in 2008, 2009. Many of you, I hope, are familiar with her work. And she's quickly focused in on this question of hope, and I really appreciate her interpretation. I hope many of you saw in the Register Guard this morning, somewhat unrelated, big political opinion piece by E.J. Dion, but he ended it on something that has really stuck with me all day. He says, hope is not a feeling, it's a virtue. We have good reason to practice it now and no alternative but to embrace it. So now we'll play this video again from Kathleen D. and her thoughts on hope and courage.
Oh, so much lost. People and all their stories, and houses and all their memories, and forests and all their comfort. I'm so sorry. Here in the valley, we're breathing the ashes of so many beautiful lives. Hard to even wrap your mind around. So I've been reading Adrienne Rich, and what she says is important to me. She says, "My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world." But I guess our question now is there any hope that we can reconstitute the world, that we can make it over again in a new way? And I guess that depends on what hope is. This new world calls for a new kind of hope. So I thought maybe I would offer you this little essay in hopes that it might lift your spirits. It's called Hope is the Thing with Feathers, and it's from a forthcoming book called Take Heart, Encouragement for Earth's Weary Lovers. It's a book I'm putting together with art by Winnipeg's Bob Haverluck. Hope is the Thing with Feathers. A long time ago, in a small house in Amherst, a young woman named Emily Dickinson sat at a table beside an open window. As filmy curtains blew over her page, she wrote her famous poem about hope. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the song without the words and never stops at all. Long after she died, artists illustrated her poem with a bird that always seems to be a perky little thing, sort of a cross between a bluebird and a wren, with its flirty tail and its open beak, a juvenile to judge from its big head. I protest on Emily's behalf. That is the wrong bird. This was 1861. White supremacists were gathering in armies and marching north. Loggers were advancing through the continent's virgin forests. Black slaves, having fled rape and lynching, hid in her neighbors' barns on their way to Canada. Malaria, typhoid, and cholera ripped through families. The dyings, she said, have been too deep for me, and before I could raise my heart from one, another has come. If hope was perching in her soul, it was something far fiercer than a bluebird. I'm going to suggest a bald eagle with its hooked beak and terrifying claws, an eagle like the one I once saw come swooping over the inlet, swing out its awful yellow talons, and grab a pink salmon off the water. The eagle flapped to rise with her prize, but her wings caught in the waves and she fell back, raising a murderous ruckus of light and sea. Then, resigned, the eagle settled on the water and began to swim its prey toward shore. The nearest rocky point was a half-mile away, and the tide was running hard. But the eagle judged her trajectory, hunched her elbows into scoops, pulled them through the water, and in this way paddled toward shore, dragging the struggling fish. A fog bank blew in and blew out again. To the east, a cloud layer obscured the sun until up it rose, gilding the water. Through it all, the fog and the gold, the eagle paddled on. Finally, it reached the broken rocks and clawed onto shore, exhausted and bedraggled, dragging up a still flapping salmon. Gulls had been waiting on shore for the eagle, no doubt hoping that they would be gifted with tiny scraps. This was not to be. As the eagle tore into the salmon's belly with a beak like an axe, the gull sidled closer and closer, but the eagle had only to turn her magnificent profile toward the gull, fix them with one terrible eye, and the gulls flinched, hopped into the sky, and fled. This is what hope is in hard times. Not a sweetly singing wren anticipating good fortunes, not a gull passively waiting for someone to bring him what he hopes for, abdicating any responsibility to feed himself. Hope in hard times is ferocious. It is strong and razor sharp. It is wild. It is stubborn. It is driven. It may choose its time, but it seizes its chance with open talons and drags it to shore, no matter how long that takes. Hope uses all its strength and love and never gives up, knowing that if it stops trying, it will drown. It's not a bluebird that sits on Emily's shoulder, tweeting comforting songs into her ear. Picture instead an eagle that pins her soul in a protective grasp. The eagle stands tall and straight on Emily's shoulder, lowers its eyebrows over piercing bold eyes that sight along the deadly weapon of its beak, and calls a screeching call that sounds like rocks scraping against a metal hull. Emily is right. There are no words to this song. Hope is an animal cry of rage and will. So yeah, it's going to take a struggle to build a new and recovering and thriving world and defend it against the increasingly ferocious climate. So everybody, call in the feathered things that are perched somewhere in your weary soul, the harpy eagles and the sharp-shinned hawk. Call in the cassowaries and the shrikes. Call in whatever character traits Velociraptor and the extravagantly feathered thing Tyrannosaurus Rex have perched in your reptilian brain. Hope is not what we need. What we need is strength. Strength in numbers and strength in neighborly love. What we need is shrieking, roaring courage. Take care of yourselves, everybody. Take care of each other.
It would be wonderful if Kathleen could be with us tonight. She sends her best, and there's an example of her best as well. It's a wonderful thought, the courage in somewhere in the back of my brain of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I'll have to see how I can pull that out. Thanks again, Tom, and Kathleen, or as many of you may know her, KDM, for being part of this tonight. Not only for these words, but for what you do every day. Again, they give us an opportunity to pause and consider things a little more deeply, a little less frantically, with a little bit less anxiety. They help us gather around that fundamental question, which we keep circling back to right now. What can I do? What can I do? What can I do to help? Certainly your support for the McKenzie River Trust is something that keeps us going, and we'll come back to you and we'll ask for that support as you've given over the years at another time. But for now, again, I want to encourage you to give generously and get others to give generously to the Lean County United Way's Wildfire Response Fund. Let's continue to put those dollars in the hands of the people that can put them to use right away. We will be getting back to some of our regular programming as McKenzie River Trust. Next Thursday, in fact, we're beginning a new video at this point, Zoom program called Habit Chats, chats about habitat. And the first one is going to be by our longtime friend and great guide, Bruce Newhouse, who's going to be talking about mushrooms and spores and hyphae and things. And I'd like to leave you with another encouraging bit of hope and courage that we have found in this region in the last 40 years that comes from that starts with hyphae, starts with the threads of spores of mushrooms and things. I'd like to finish with some images from and reminders from our good friends. I see Fred Swanson's actually is joining us tonight. Fred, thank you. All of these images come to me from Fred Swanson, who has been a longtime researcher at H.J. Andrews, the experimental forest that's at the other end of the fire line. So far as we understand, H.J. has essentially been spared. We're really hoping the fire dies down and doesn't continue to proceed east. But this is a place that's magical. It is focused on the long-term research of trees and soil and water and critters. It's also a place dedicated to writing and making art and otherwise reflecting on our place in this world. In the heat of an emergency, these acts can be difficult. It's hard to keep the long-term in mind when the short-term is so alarming. But the learning that comes from that long-term work can also shore us up and give us reasons for hope and give us courage. So this is before, and everyone remembers May 18th, 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted violently. And much of the world thought that the blast zone, would never recover ecologically or as a community. But within 10 days, researchers like Fred from HJ and elsewhere made the trek north, and they stood on the cooling ash, and at their feet already fungi was spreading its hyphae, waiting for rains to bring nutrients with which they could grow and reproduce. In the weeks and months that followed, plants emerged like phoenix from the ashes, critters popped out of the refuge of lake muds, some birds crafted new nests, and others brought seeds on their legs and wings when they landed to rest in the mini ponds that developed after the snow melted. These biological legacies seeded another eruption, an eruption of life in the ecological community, far exceeding those original assumptions of doom. Our communities have been hit hard by a cataclysm. The fires are still burning, friends are still missing. We have many more painful days ahead of us, but already people are pulling together in legacy-making acts. They are supporting each other, sharing and rebuilding with courage and hope. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of tonight and a part of all of this. Thank you for all you do for the McKenzie River Trust and the community that is your home. We'll stay in touch. I hope you will do the same. Good night.